here on France 24. I'm Mark Owen, and I'm joined by four people all ready to dissect world events for your editorial delectation. Without delay, let me introduce them to you. Aaron Zaleski, Paris correspondent of the Daily Beast. Aaron, thanks for being with us. Dave Clark, news editor of Agence France Presse. Dave, thanks for joining us. Paul Taylor, contributing editor of Politico. Thank you, sir. And François Picard, the usual face you see fronting this programme. He's in Washington, D.C., where he's been covering the inauguration of President Biden for France 24. Welcome all. Now, Joe Biden's been inaugurated as the 46th President of the United States of America. Already, reporters are remarking on a change of tone from the White House towards the media and towards the reporting of the news, the facts, plain and simple. President Biden has already signed a number of executive orders to reverse policies of his controversial and, of course, twice impeached predecessor. Climate, immigration, just two areas where there was immediate action. But the coronavirus pandemic is foremost on President Biden's agenda, with over 400,000 Americans killed so far. No plan nor briefing from the previous administration.
Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once-in-a-century virus that silently stalks the country. It's taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer.
President Joe Biden there speaking at his inauguration. Let's bring in our guests to get some thoughts about the tasks facing Joe Biden. Erin, I'll start with you, if you don't mind. And clearly, coronavirus, top of the agenda.
Yes, well, I mean, there's two things to keep in mind here. I mean, throughout history, incoming American presidents have inherited challenging circumstances. Like, for instance, we had Woodrow Wilson, who faced both the First World War and another influenza pandemic. So taking office during a tumultuous time is not that unusual. What I see as unusual, there's two things that are different here. There's a very acrimonious political divide. There's a lack of political unity in the country. And also the fact that the U.S. has lost a lot of credibility on the world stage. America was pretty popular when Obama left office, and its standing in the world has really fallen since then. So I feel like Biden, in addition to tackling the coronavirus crisis and the racial divide in the country and the political divide in the country, he's going to have to work really hard to regain credibility on the world stage as well.
Indeed. So it's not just a case of changing what's happened before, reshaping what goes next, but changing the perception. I think Biden put it during the inauguration, Francois, about not the power of the presence, but somehow the presence of the power. Is a great phrase like that he used to sort of say that the United States is now about reshaping itself and reinventing itself.
Yeah, he described it as the next chapter in American history, Mark, and for that next chapter to occur, government has to govern. There's been a feeling that there was something of a power vacuum on January the 6th, with competing agencies completely caught off guard when there was that storming of the Capitol. I'm standing on the Mall right now. You can see behind me National Guards troops who are heading off for duty. And there is a feeling here, by the way, that a lot has changed since Wednesday. If we look over here, this part of the mall where I'm standing was completely sealed off to the public. This is in the so-called green zone. And they're dismantling where you had those American flags in lieu of people, American flags to remind us of the resiliency of the United States in this pandemic. And so that's being dismantled. Of course, security is being lightened, but it's still there. Over here, you can see as we look towards that rostrum where Joe Biden was sworn in on Wednesday on the west steps of the U.S. Capitol, you can see that that is still what's the so-called red zone, and it is still closed off to the public. I spoke to one source who says the government is strongly thinking of keeping a presence of some 6,000 National Guard's troops, at least until the month of May.
That is a phenomenal thing to consider, Dave Clark, isn't it? The fact that this would normally have been an event attended by everybody, from the great and good to just people in the street. And, of course, it's all been changed because of the events of January the 6th.
Yes, and because of the events of January 6th and principally because of the COVID virus, obviously large crowds didn't turn out to celebrate the inauguration, giving a rather stark image. So it was obviously an opportunity also for Trump supporters to show off about how they had a bigger inauguration 4 years ago, which obviously they lied about at the time, claiming it was the biggest ever. But the previous administration was obviously fond of the show business aspect of things. And so that was, I suppose, something that they could note on the way out this week. But it was notable that the Jen Psaki, when she came to the White House to become the new spokeswoman, didn't try and sugarcoat any of this, as her predecessor, Sean Spicer, had done exactly 4 years ago when he obviously didn't take any questions. She said she was going to be straight with the press this time around. And obviously she is a holdover from the Obama administration. There's so many of Biden's people. I covered them back in the day, and now a lot of my former contacts are back in government. There'll be a certain relief among the press corps, and there's a certain relief here in Brussels among European leaders that they now have the kind of America they're used to.
Indeed. Two things I'm taking from that, Paul. If I need a contact in Washington coming straight to you, that's the first thing I'll do with your contacts there. And also, where you are now, Ursula von der Leyen, obviously saying that she sees in the US now as someone who is an ally. And Joe Biden?
Yeah, definitely an ally. And, there's immense relief around Europe. And I think in the West, if you can still talk about a West, that the adults are back in charge in Washington, and that the people who are in charge know Europe well. They are Europhiles. They are experienced professionals. They are internationalists. They are multilateralists. That's to say they'll try and work with allies and through international institutions. All of that is immensely welcome. Doesn't make any of the actual subject matter necessarily easier to deal with. And of course, the rest of the world has not been waiting for Biden, and all of the people that you would expect have been putting down markers. The Russians are accused of having staged a major cyber attack on the American government during the President Trump's lame duck period. The Chinese arrested a lot of human rights and civil rights activists in Hong Kong. The North Koreans announced they were building a nuclear submarine. The Iranians stepped up their uranium enrichment and talked about producing solid uranium. So everybody is sort of testing the incoming American president. And with Europe, there'll be lots to talk about, but the Europeans also are keen that while they want to work with the Biden administration, they're keen to make sure that some of the positive changes he's made on the climate, rejoining the Paris Accords on day one, on rejoining the World Health Organization, that these things will be built on so that there really is consultation. And they've been covering their own backsides, if you like, by going ahead with a trade investment agreement with China without waiting for Biden, something which some people in America think was a little unkind, but which from the European point of view shows that Europe wants to keep its own freedom of action and strategic autonomy, whatever that means.
Indeed, whatever that means. And what you're describing, of course, about Paul, about the reaction around the world is really interesting. The other thing, Paul, that Biden has is this core of Donald Trump supporters who are still there. They haven't gone away. Paul Taylor, do you think that this is going to prove to be the kind of issue that it has been over the past, recent months? Or do you feel over the months to come it might change?
Well, I don't think they're going to go away, but I think that they are as much a problem for the Republican Party and for Biden's opponents as they are for Biden himself. Of course, there's a concern worldwide about American democracy, which you've seen. But I think some of there was a degree of schadenfreude about America falling so low, which probably exaggerates the extent to which American power has ebbed. America is still the strongest power globally. And I think that that quote you were looking for, you were reaching for, I think was the power of our example. I think that we'll see a bit more of that. But yes, America will not be pacified overnight. But I think that if anybody can reach out and achieve more bipartisanship, it is Joe Biden, that old congressional fox who spent most of his lifetime on the Hill making deals. And I think there are people in the Republican Party who see that there's an advantage of working with him, at least early on, and who also want to kill off Donald Trump if they possibly can. We'll see how that runs in the impeachment trial, which the Democrats are keen to push through as quickly as possible.
Ruling by power, not but the power of our example. Thank you, Paul, for clarifying that one for me. I couldn't quite get my head around the actual words. Good job you're here to sort of put me right. Thank you very much indeed. Francois, of course, you were at the inauguration. You were there as it happened. Did you get a sense that this is really changing the way that I think most of the world wants it to change? Or did you also get a sense that there are so many people where you are who basically see Biden as not their man, and really they still feel loyal to Donald Trump?
Yeah, he addressed them in that inauguration address, saying he would work for them just as much as those on the other side of the aisle. And just to pick up on those points made by Dave, yeah, there is this feeling because there's so many familiar faces that are in with him. Two reasons inside his administration, and that's simply because he has to hit the ground running so fast. There's so much to do on day one. And then you heard Paul Taylor there mention the fact that he's going to be sly and good at working with legislators, having spent 34 years himself in the U.S. Senate. It's going to be tested as early as Monday. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said that she has sent up the articles of impeachment. The Senate is obliged to start them next Monday. So, yeah, Donald Trump is going to continue to suck the oxygen in the room. He's still going to be the conversation next week for certain as that impeachment trial gets underway. And already we're getting our first tussle between Republicans and Democrats on the Hill up there. The Republicans who are arguing with the Democrats about the procedure. Mitch McConnell wanted that Senate trial to start in mid-February. The Democrats have decided that it has to be expedited. How long that trial will be, that's a different matter as well. So, yeah, we're going to see Donald Trump in our headlines, Mark, for a long time to come.
Indeed. Unprecedented situation, twice impeached and now twice a Senate trial. We'll see how that develops. Erin, would you impeach it? And would you send him for trial to the Senate? There's some people who say it shouldn't happen. It's a divisive thing. Do you think it's something that should go ahead?
I think it's absolutely something that should go ahead. And I mean, especially given what happened on January 6th, that's reason enough already that it should go ahead. And I think it also sends a message to a section of his supporters that, again, there's a majority of them that still believe that Biden didn't even legitimately win the election. And I think that this sends a message that the toxic ideology that Trump really nourished during his presidency won't be tolerated in the new administration, and there will be consequences.
Erin Zaleski, thank you very much indeed. Dave Clark, we're out of time for part one, but I'm going to steal a quick statement and a bit of time for you to talk. Dave, obviously the EU, the US, looking forward to a better future going forward under Biden, perhaps. How soon do you expect that to show itself?
Well, President Biden has been invited to a NATO summit sometime we think in the first half of this year. They haven't set a date. Obviously, NATO is very keen to get him here to Brussels very quickly. And Charles Michel, the president of the European Council, has said that they want to tack on an EU-US summit on the same day. He's mentioned that publicly. He wouldn't do so if he was expecting to be snubbed. So we're expecting to see President Biden over here at some point in the next 2 or 3 months. Now there's a lot of relief here, but there are also people here in Brussels who saw the Trump presidency as confirming their idea there should be more autonomy for Europe, and some will be warning that just because there's a president that we know from his days as vice president under Obama, it doesn't necessarily mean that America is always going to be in Europe's camp going forward. And a challenge like COVID has got nothing to do with geopolitics. Europe will have to solve that problem on its own.
Indeed. Dave Clark, thank you very much indeed. We've got Aaron Zaleski, Dave Clark, Paul Taylor, Francois Picard chewing over the world's events for us here in the world this week. That's part one. Stay with us. Part two to come. Part two of the world this week. Welcome back. Let's just introduce you to our correspondents and editorialists who are here to dissect the news for us, and we're glad of their presence. Aaron Zaleski of the Daily Beast, Dave Clark from Agence France Presse, Paul Taylor from Politico, and you'll recognise Francois Picard there in Washington. Supporters of Alexei Navalny are facing strong armed tactics in Moscow and over 60 other cities to try to stop them turning out in protest about his jail sentence. The opposition figure, an anti-corruption campaigner, is in prison right now serving a 30-day sentence. He was arrested as he landed back in Moscow on Monday, put on trial and sentenced in the same day. Now, that might speak to Moscow's efficiency in its legal system, or it might be, as Navalny himself said, a trumped-up charge and a fait accompli.
Много видел насмешек над правосудиями, но просто, видимо, вот этот тот самый дед в бункере настолько всего боится, что просто какой-то демонстративно разорвали и выкинули на помойку уголовно-процессуальный кодекс. Это невозможно, то, что происходит здесь. Это просто какой-то наивысшей степени беззакония.
Navalny in, suitable mood. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, is warning Navalny's supporters of the consequences of attending what he calls unauthorized events. That's the protest Navalny is calling for. Let's hear again from Navalny and then Peskov.
Чего боится эта жаба, сидящая на трубе? Чего боятся эти бункерные воры больше всего? Вы сами отлично знаете. Выхода людей на улицы. Потому что это та вещь, тот политический фактор, который нельзя игнорировать. Он самый главный, самый важный. Это суть политики. Поэтому не бойтесь, выходите на улицы. Выходите не за меня, выходите за себя и за свое будущее.
Безусловно, налицо определенное.
Undoubtedly, we see certain action related to calls for unauthorized illegal events. So, it's absolutely natural that there are warnings about possible consequences of not respecting the law.
Let's bring in Aaron Zaleski for the first comment of this one. Aaron, there's something incredibly inevitable about all of this, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, there definitely is. I think what's most interesting about, actually extraordinary about Navalny is he's courageous, for starters. He hasn't backed down. He's had attempts on his life, and he's still moving forward. And Putin is quite dismissive of him publicly. For instance, he doesn't say his name, or he tries to avoid saying his name. He refers to him usually as though he's just some blogger. But he's been able to rally a tremendous amount of support. He's really harnessed the power of social media to gain a sizable support base. And I think it makes Putin quite nervous. You don't try to kill someone whose influence is completely insignificant. Secondly, his story has captured a lot of the world's attention. People are really looking closely at this story, and I think everyone's going to be watching to see what happens during the protests tomorrow. I mean, I think the scale of the protests could indicate the size of his support base.
Indeed. Dave Clark in Brussels there for Agence France Presse. The EU's called for Navalny's immediate release. He was treated in Germany. We spoke about this case earlier this week on the France 24 debate. We had someone from Russia who was speaking very much on behalf almost of Vladimir Putin, saying that it's complete nonsense. He wasn't poisoned. It was all made up by Navalny and his people. What's the perspective where you are on this?
Well, for many of the leaders in Europe, it's an inconvenient truth. A lot of them would say, a lot of people in Berlin and some people in Paris would say that they wanted to try the kind of middle path between the American power and between and China and Russia and develop their own relationship with Russia. Navalny is there. You can't deny his case. Rather like the Salisbury case, it had in the UK, or indeed a murder that took place in Germany. The fingerprints of the Russian authorities are all over this. Navalny spoke to the European Parliament by video link when he was in Germany. He's got a lot of support there. Obviously, the European Parliament doesn't have a lot of power in this debate, but they have spoken out very strongly. They passed a non-binding resolution urging Germany to halt the building of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Navalny has gone back to jail in Russia very courageously, but he obviously prepared that quite well. He managed to release a YouTube video that has had tens of millions of views. Doubtless many of them curious non-Russians, but apparently very many Russians have also had access to his exposés of Putin's regime. And today, Charles Michel, the president of the European Council, which represents EU leaders, called President Putin and directly urged him to ensure Navalny's safety and his safe release. We don't know what will happen when things come to a head this weekend, but it put Putin in a complicated position. If Navalny had just fled abroad after the assassination attempt on him, he would have no influence anymore on what happens in Russia. But now that he's in jail in Russia, conversely, he becomes a bigger figure, and it would be difficult for Putin to dismiss him now that he's become such a public face of this cause.
Dave, thank you. Paul Taylor, can I bring you in? Paul Taylor from Politico. If anything were to happen to Navalny in prison, mysteriously, obviously that would, in a sense, create some of those martyr status, would it not?
Absolutely. And I think that's, why he went back thinking that, they've tried this once, but they can't possibly do it again. The question of, I think, for the rest of the world, and particularly for us here in Europe, is, what can we do that is supportive and helpful for Navalny, but that doesn't, in a way, help the Russian authorities to discredit him or to punish his supporters. President Putin signed into law just this month a new piece of legislation that sort of allows any Russian citizen who has ever worked on a project that was funded by the European Union or by others abroad to be branded a foreign agent. And all this is part of the attempt to polarize the society and behind Putin. And so I think there must be a lot of thinking going on, as Dave Clark said, rather, inconvenient thinking about, well, how can we, what can we do that helps people, that doesn't harm the people we're trying to help, but also that doesn't just shoot ourselves in the foot. And the idea that Germany should stop building the Nord Stream pipeline now because of the fact that Navalny has been arrested on his return to Russia, or because there was an attempt made to poison him. We didn't stop trading oil with Saudi Arabia when Saudi agents believed to have been on the orders of Mohammed bin Sultan hacked to death the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who was a leading opponent. So we need to be careful about not being carried away, I think, by by emotionalism in this. Many countries trade oil and gas with Russia and with other regimes that are unsavory. And to expect that Germany would now suddenly make a big sacrifice, it's a bit like saying to the Germans, let's you put sanctions on Russia. We'll watch as you take the pain. And this pipeline is almost built. But I think there are other things that the EU can do, particularly, and again, we go back to the power of our example, it's our soft power. It's our ability to reach Russians through social media, through broadcasting, through people-to-people contacts. Perhaps the most subversive thing we could do for Putin would be to let more Russians into Europe on visitor visas, and make it easier for Russians to come here. Because ultimately, if we think that our way of life is better, then that's a pretty our way of life in a way is, or the envy of our way of life could be subversive, as it proved to be in the communist era.
Indeed, fabulous idea. Paul, thank you. Let's bring in Francois Picard. Francois, the previous occupier of the White House, of course, was a great fan of Vladimir Putin. Perhaps he could have rung him up and had a conversation with him and talked about it. But he probably wouldn't have done that, I'm sure. Joe Biden will have a different approach. Do you think anything is likely to change in terms of how Washington will be looking at Moscow and issues such as Navalny?
It's a 180-degree change in the White House, at least, Mark. Joe Biden's incoming U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, has already stated that he's in favor of giving lethal weapons to Ukraine, of possibly bringing Georgia in as a NATO member. The U.S. right now, which has decided a major overhaul because there's been a recent cyber hacking incident in this country. Russia is strongly suspected, and so the incoming administration, the new National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, they're looking at it squarely. And when it comes to Russia, though, you're going to hear Biden, who will criticize unequivocally Vladimir Putin. It's a return to the old days on that score. However, you're also going to see over the next 2 weeks a bit of a subtle dance. That's because on February the 5th, the last remaining nuclear arms treaty expires. Both Washington and Moscow want to renew it. If they don't, that means that as of February 6th, we could see all the nuclear weapons roll back into Europe the way it was back in the days of the Cold War. So it's going to be a bit of a subtle dance leading up to that February 5th deadline. And then afterwards, we can expect to see Joe Biden push back quite hard on Moscow, particularly, as you said at the outset, because his predecessor was so soft.
Francois Picard, thank you very much indeed. We will wait and see what happens over the next 24, 48 hours to Alexei Navalny's supporters, should they turn out to protest, as he has called for, across Russia. Next year on The World This Week, Europe contemplating new measures to stop the spread of COVID-19. The main takeaway from the EU video conference that took place this week is that negative PCR tests will be required for any traveller to enter EU territory. There's a strange development too. Hungary has chosen to use Sputnik V Russian vaccine, not approved by EU medics. And news of an old friend, the UK, no longer in the EU, of course, but right on the doorstep, outstripping the bloc of 27 with its spiralling rates of infection and record deaths. 40,000 cases, nearly 1,500 deaths over the past 24 hours. These are shocking figures. UK doing far better in terms of numbers vaccinated, though. Boris Johnson has warned that the new variants could be more deadly or linked to more deaths as well, which is another worrying factor. And the shortage of vaccine is another issue raising political temperatures across Europe, with the new variants, as we said, from Britain and Brazil being tracked down in Germany too. Chancellor Angela Merkel had this to say.
We have to take the danger posed by this mutation very seriously. That is all I can advise all of us to do. And this will be also a very important topic this evening at the video conference of the heads of state and government of the European Union. It will be about mutation. It will be about how we combat the spread with measures that are as equivalent as possible throughout the European Union, because epidemiologically speaking, we are one area as the European Union.
Chancellor Merkel with a characteristic common sense there. This programme, of course, taking place the way it is, with the guests at a distance, via the various link-ups we can do in order to respect social distancing and the rules regarding COVID-19. Thanks, nonetheless, to all four of you for being with me, because, believe me, a show with just me isn't very interesting. Your views are what count. Erin, can I bring you in next for a comment about what Angela Merkel was saying and the situation regarding COVID-19 across Europe? I mean, clearly, when as a layperson, you hear there's a shortage of vaccine, it isn't being supplied as it should be supplied. AstraZeneca saying they're struggling to meet the deadline for the end of this month for the EU. It doesn't kind of fill you with optimism, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, there can't really have been a worse time for this sort of thing to happen. And I think they had mentioned also how Hungary, I think, went with the Russia vaccine instead. And I think that if the EU fails to deliver, even though perhaps by no fault of their own, we may see more countries looking to Russia and China to fill the gap. And so that's a concern as well.
Dave Clark, can you give us some insight into how Hungary made its decision regarding taking the Sputnik V vaccine?
Well, I'm not in Budapest, but obviously Viktor Orban has in the past shown his independence from his fellow European Union leaders by looking to Moscow and also by doing things his own way. He like the UK, has decided to authorize vaccines that haven't been yet authorized by the European Medicines Agency. But I've got to say that the other countries, including his neighbour Austria and other countries within Europe, are becoming frustrated that the AstraZeneca vaccine, for example, has not yet been authorized within Europe. They're betting a lot on some of the later vaccines that hopefully will be easier to transport and to store than the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine that they began with. But there are obviously still concerns about this. And it's not always clear to me here in Brussels whether concerns are purely medical and industrial or whether there's also geopolitical concerns. As you say, Hungary authorized a Russian vaccine, the Sputnik vaccine. The UK was quicker to authorize the AstraZeneca vaccine, which was developed in coordination with their own Oxford University than some other countries. And we often hear grumbling in Brussels that the Commission is buying German vaccines or buying French vaccines, or as if there's a constant suspicion, obviously never proven and oft denied, that there are national industrial and national geopolitical motives going on behind this. Plus, there's the political imperative. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, has made it a great quest of her Commission to coordinate and to drive this vaccine strategy, to give Europe a role in what is the biggest challenge of their time. She'd hoped to be tackling climate change at this point, but a new challenge came along. And she wants to put Europe at the forefront of that. But obviously that means there's a lot of scrutiny on her. And frankly, it's the leaders and ministers in nation states that will suffer first at the ballot box if they fail on this great challenge. And they're putting a lot of pressure on her right now.
Final comment on this topic from Paul Taylor.
Yeah, well, as Dave says, I mean, I think the thing is that the biggest risk was that you would have vaccine nationalism and everybody fighting, as you saw on the tarmac in China, for the masks. You know, who was going to be first to get the vaccine and so on. European governments rose above that with on the proposal of the Commission. They agreed that they would buy these things collectively. There's now, of course, polemics about everything. Did they get a good price? Did they get a bad price? Are they being screwed by Big Pharma? Why is Big Pharma slow? And so on. I think if you just step back a second, you know, that vaccine has been developed faster than any vaccine in the past. and that it would be miraculous that there would not be teething problems in the rolling out, particularly in the logistics of it all. Everybody is now so desperate to be vaccinated. You have to take a deep breath and remember that before Christmas, a majority of, or at least a plurality of French people said they didn't trust the vaccine and they didn't want to be vaccinated when they were asked by pollsters. That suddenly turned around. Somebody sent me a hilarious cartoon the other day of a Smurf, a French Smurf with steam, angry Smurf with steam coming out of his ears saying, "Where's that damn virus that I don't want?" So it's all, now people are desperate because, especially with infection rates rising again and with the possibility, as Boris Johnson said today, that this new variant may be more deadly than the previous one. Everybody's desperate. There's this race going on between how quickly can we vaccinate people. Lots of things we still don't know, like whether you can still be a carrier of coronavirus even if you are protected yourself by the vaccine and so on. So lots of open questions, and the politicians are reacting to that nervousness and anxiety among the public. So far, I think the Europeans, with the exception perhaps of the Hungarians, have not given in to vaccine nationalism. There was a lot of pressure in Germany saying, we've got the money, let's go out and buy more for ourselves and, sod the Europeans. Well, that hasn't happened. And I think as long as the calm, evidence-based hand of Angela Merkel is in charge, it won't happen. But I think if you take a step back, Europe is really doing something unprecedented by buying these vaccines together. And of course, that puts them in the front line, puts them under the microscope. And if it doesn't work, then, there may be a backlash against Europe. But I think it's far too early to say that it doesn't work.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. Let's quickly get on to our final topic. There is no time, but I'm taking the time. The Michelin Guide has given a star to a vegan restaurant here in France. Some people might say that's kind of sacrilegious given France's relationship with meat. I'm going to give Francois Picard first bite at this one. How did you react to that news, Francois?
So you could look at it two ways. Either you could say it's another sign the apocalypse is upon us. But you've also seen over the last 5 years that now you do have vegetarian items on the menus in French restaurants. 5 years ago, you barely saw that. Now it's on every single menu. I've looked up what's on that menu in that restaurant in the southwest of France. It looks amazing. And if we're going to save the planet, we do have to eat less meat. We had on a Michelin-starred chef a few years ago who said meat should be an occasion. Doesn't mean don't eat meat at all, but, a little bit less. Make it into something special.
Last time I ate with Francois Picard, he cooked me a veggie burger. Just thought I'd share that with everybody. I'm afraid we're out of time, so our other three guests don't get a chance to comment on this one. Thumbs up or thumbs down, that's all I can ask you. Maybe it's both. We're getting thumbs up. That's great stuff. Thanks to Dave. Thanks to Erin. Thanks to Paul. Thank you to Francois Picard. Most of all, thanks to you for watching. This is The World This Week on France 24. Stay with us.